When it comes to the big leagues of Nintendo, no single franchise can be brought up without bringing up the big man himself, Donkey Kong. What, you thought I was gonna say Mario? Nah, look at that man. He is nothing but a speck of dust compared to Donkey Kong. But in terms of franchise leads, nothing compares to Mario. I mean, the guy has nearly 1 billion games of his sold, and the Super Mario series of games accounting for nearly 50% of those sales numbers. Mario is the big man of the video game world, and to end off this NES September Reviewathon, I think it would be best to look at all 4 Super Mario titles on the NES, with a little extra ones sprinkled here and there. In fact, you can kind of disregard this as a NES thing and more of a ultimate retro Super Mario review, just, all 4 of them combined into one title, just to end this little series off. Of course, we've already talked about Mario's prehistory being shared with Donkey Kong, being a heroic carpenter, to a dickhead of a zoo trainer, to a labor union plumber, and then a home renovator. Damn, Mario's got more labor skills than me, even in my introverted dreams. Now, what job will Mario soon apply for again, since house renovation wasn't his specialty? Well, you'll be surprised to hear that he actually returns to plumbing once again, but has to go back to his old habits of jumping over shit and saving ladies. Learning from the success of Donkey Kong, Nintendo wanted to give something similar in that manner for the upcoming Nintendo Entertainment System. I guess they were mixed on what type of action platforming game they should make, so they made 3 games with basic platformer ideals. One involving a challenging platforming via climbing vertically upwards, one locked on a singles area of the screen with small platform spots, but not really the main focus of the game, kind of fitting more in line with Mario Bros here. And finally, one that would take traits more in line with the original Donkey Kong games, Super Mario Bros. I mean, to be fair, at this point the Mario arcade series always had some platforming aspects tied to it with the exception of Donkey Kong 3, but that doesn't have Mario in it, so it was pretty clear to Nintendo that at this point Mario was their go-to jumping and platforming guy, but they needed to change it substantially in order to qualify it as a full game experience for their console rather than being treated as a high score racker, which would eventually become kind of the side priority for this game during and after development. They soon developed a story borrowing the damsel in distress trope from Donkey Kong, but changing it up so instead, you're an Italian plumber on his way through a magical land of mushrooms and little creatures, going world by world in order to save a princess named Toadstool, though we call her Peach nowadays, from the clutches of an evil turtle-looking dragon named Bowser, who is the director and leader of the Koopa army, who does so in order to rule over the Mushroom Kingdom. There isn't much else to the story besides describing what compromises his army and something about the citizens turning into blocks. Yeah, I don't really care about that part. If a block's got something in it, I'm gonna bust in it. Wow! Now that a story was developed, it was up to Nintendo's research and development 4th team to design it as a playable platforming game. Now, just like with Donkey Kong, this game was no easy feat to make even with their understanding of coding and developing games. For one, this game wasn't to be locked to a single screen like what most other arcade games did, or force a transition when going into the next screen, but instead wanted to implement horizontal side-scrolling to the game in order to allow fluid continuation through the level. Although side-scrolling had existed beforehand, they were mostly from shoot-'em-up arcade games, and the few other ones used automatic scrolling mixed with parallax scrolling to give it the illusion of moving fast against the background. Super Mario Bros. Rather allowed horizontal side-scrolling only when you're moving forward, and the scrolling was to be matched with the speed itself of Mario movements, so if you jump but push back on the D-pad, the screen will slow immediately and then stop in place. Now, this wasn't the first game to use a screen system like this by Nintendo. In fact, most of this was ported over from Excitebike, but some parts were tweaked in order to fit with a completely new medium designed for it. It also completely sacrificed any form of vertical scrolling, so anytime you climbed up a vine, you'll just transition to the other area. And you couldn't go back against the scrolls, so if an item rolls past the left side of the screen, well then tough shit. It also didn't have any form of diagonal scrolling. Yet. So this adventure is purely horizontal start to back. One of the biggest priorities during development was the difficulty in trying to understand beginning players. Remember that the video game console industry was just getting started, and there had only existed such few action-adventure styled games that were often difficult themselves since those few were arcades only. So of course they'd be difficult. Instead, they decided to focus on simplicity for their first game, down to the level design and enemy interaction. This is why level 1-1 is often considered the best beginning level in any game outside of its iconic status as being the first level in Super Mario Bros. You have to remember that this was the first video game for many people and the first side-scroller platform for anyone outside the arcades. So simple level design to compensate for a beginning player's understanding, especially this early into the video game world, was a top priority. As a result of these decisions, along with a high marketing campaign and bundle packs, Super Mario Bros. Became a must-play for the NES and helped put Mario on the worldwide map, assuming Donkey Kong didn't already have some influence on that earlier. But Super Mario Bros. Had clearly put a set standard for how the Mario franchise would turn out and the way Nintendo would treat their big flagship titles from here on, both then and now. Back in 1985 though, this was as large and adventurous as a home console game could get. In Super Mario Bros. You traverse through 8 whole worlds, each having 4 levels that can consist of an overworld, underground, underwater, platforming, or as it would be known in later games as athletic designed, and a castle. Though sometimes the overworld can change to represent a different season or something like traveling up to the castle, it still maintains the same theme throughout. You go through all 32 levels in order to reach Bowser, who was then known as King Koopa, who had kidnapped Princess Toadstool, who we now know as Peach, all the while sending troops to invade the homeland of the Mushroom Kingdom and entrap the citizens in blocks and bricks. Your job as Mario is to of course rescue the damsel in distress while taking in power-ups and killing bad guys. And yes, I do mean kill, as referred here in the manual. Many bad guys can be dealt with a single stomp like Goombas, Bullet Bills, Hammer Bros, and Lakitu, providing you can reach up to him. Some can be stomped on but retreat into their shells, which can be kicked to either deal with other enemies nearby or to simply fuck yourself over when running with it at full speed near a pipe. Koopas, Paratroopas, and Buzzy Beetles all have this trait. Some enemies have traits that won't allow you to jump on them, like Bloopers, Cheep Cheeps, and Spinies, which is where power-ups come into play. 4 forms of power-ups exist, but only 3 of them have actual effects tied to them when grabbed. Everyone pretty much knows how these work. Mushrooms cause you to grow in size into Super Mario, Fire Flowers allow you to spew fireballs as projectiles to deal with said enemies mentioned earlier, and the Starman when collected gives temporary invincibility to Mario, which can clear quite literally every enemy given. Starman are much rarer in this game though, and you can't hold on to them for any vital spots later in the game. If Mario is hit during these power-up transformations, he automatically reverts back to base level Mario. Yeah, what we now call Small Mario is just how Mario was at the time. Probably explain why he's so short. This does mean Mario can only take 1 hit. Hit again and it's a life loss. But don't think of it as something like ghosts and goblins, because that mostly comes at fault from some of the enemy designs and inconsistent platforming. In this game, enemies are usually very simple to deal with and stay in their area of the screen unless you're Lakitu, and don't require precise timing to hit or avoid them unless you're the Hammer Bro and the Blooper. But even then, they can be circumvented easily through the usage of the power-ups as mentioned earlier. And each level has a decent amount of power-ups in their blocks, unlike with ghosts and goblins, which seems almost always RNG when it came to when they would spawn and what item would spawn in. The platforming is also not difficult in this game. Sure, you may have some tight jumping moments, but overall when you land even a single pixel on a block or platform, you're likely going to stick the landing each and every time. And it's not just the platforming. Mario just feels good to control. He has a good running speed, a good height off of his jump, and although his jump and air movement is influenced by the D-pad in the way like Ice Climbers is, his traction is controllable and his speed can build up quick, unlike with Ice Climbers, which didn't have a run button, so it was hard when your character's jump would actually go for a good arc or just barely move forward. Mario also has the ability to crouch in super form, both with momentum or at a standstill, and swim at a mashing rate but only in underwater sections, and also makes his horizontal speed considerably slower than usual. After clearing 3 levels in a world, you'll reach to the castle and journey your way through there. The castles are always the prime difficult levels in this game, and rightfully so. You're entering into enemy territory. At the end of each castle, there is always a Bowser waiting for you. Now, I say a Bowser because the Bowsers from Castle 1 to 7 are just enemies in disguise, which can be seen when throwing a ton of fireballs at them. When defeating them, Toad will greet you at the end of the castle to thank you for saving them, but to also tell you, hey, you got 7 more castles to deal with before you get some poontang. Seriously, why do I have to go to 8 different worlds to get to the real castle? Shouldn't the first Toad tell me which castle I really need to go to? Or is this like a game of telephones where they keep misremembering which castle holds the princess in? Anyways, once you reach the 8th castle and pass the gauntlet of enemies, you reach face to face with the real Bowser. Nothing particularly special about him, so we just cut the axe, watch him fall to his doom, and looky, it's Princess Toadstool that we've saved. Press B to start another adventure? Yeah, more like press B to exit this fucking game. I mean, what do I have to say? It's Super Mario Bros. It was a complete revolution in the gaming industry, saw the popularity of the platforming genre outside of arcades, established a fairly simple storyline with a set of casts and characters that would be well respected and established for the rest of Mario history, and most importantly, it gave Nintendo bank 40 plus million in sales. It was hot cakes, baby. I would like to specify that although Super Mario Bros. Is quite a big name title, I wouldn't exactly call it a must play. It's really a title you pick up if you're interested on how the Mario series started, how it set up the standards of the Super Mario lineup of games, or just for a very quick run through, whether that's speedrunning or not. Because even when not speedrunning, this game is short, not something to be surprised about for a launch NES title, but this can easily be done in about an hour give or take. It also established what was to come for the series, but that's about it. It's a very samey game through and through the whole run. Once you've played the first world, you've essentially played through most of it. The only difference is if you're willing to finish up with it. Is it a legacy game? Absolutely. Is it something you should have on your shelf? Well, maybe if you're into collecting or are a huge Mario fan. But is it worth the time to play, or at least be a must play? I don't think so. There are better Super Mario titles on the NES that give you the exact same thing, but with much more. And by titles, I just mean one. And it's not the one we're talking about next, I'll tell you that one. Before we jump into Super Mario Bros. 2, we're actually going to go ahead and review Super Mario Bros. 2. Well, a lot of people over here don't keep that subtitle. Instead, over here, we call it Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels. So Super Mario Bros. Was a hot seller, probably topping the charts longer than Lil Nas did in 2019. Naturally, Nintendo wanted to make a sequel. No, they had to make a sequel. They were required by God to make a sequel. And so soon after, they began working on Super Mario Bros. 2. Super Mario Bros. 2 essentially shares the same physics and core gameplay design as the original, but with a more difficult twist to it. Straight up, there's nothing of value added to the game. Some sprites are upgraded to look more realistic, or at least not so simplified, and the backgrounds are a bit busier, but otherwise there's almost nothing different between this game and Super Mario Bros. Same engine, same physics except for Luigi, who gets a slightly higher jump with slightly lower traction. Same music in every level, same world and level length, same HUD, it's all almost the fucking same. Even the enemies too. Okay, well there is one new enemy in the game, but I hardly call it anything new. It's a red variant of the piranha plant. The only difference is that if you're next to a pipe, these guys will still rise in and out of it. Other than that, they are exactly the same. So if everything's the same, why is the game treated so differently compared to its predecessor? Well, simply put, it's because of two things. Its regional exclusivity, and its level design. Super Mario Bros. 2 never saw the light of day outside of Japan. In fact, it wouldn't for nearly 7 years, and the reason so is because of it being rejected by Nintendo of America due to its sheer difficulty. I mean, like Howard Phillips in shock on Miyamoto's decision to make this game type of difficulty. In need of a sequel to the hit game Super Mario Bros., they would instead look to retrofit another title that played and visually looked close to Mario, but that'll be talked about in a few. For a long time, nobody outside of those traveling in and out of Japan had any idea that a sequel to the bestseller Super Mario Bros. Game was exclusive not only for Nintendo, but also for Japan. Unless you had some sort of super special foreign store that sold imported games and consoles, or had some weird corner mall shop with pirated copies of the game, it was very unlikely you had heard of this title. Remember, the gaming industry was just recovering at the time. Grown-ups often only got video games for young children and didn't have a large interest in the medium, and gaming journalism was something behind a very niche subculture that was still only locked behind by national border. It's no wonder no one at the time ever heard about this game, and it probably didn't matter anyway since, like I said earlier, America was still going to get a sequel to the hit Super Mario Bros. Game anyway, so why give a fuck? It wouldn't be until Super Mario All-Stars on the Super Nintendo where people would finally get a taste of the exclusive Super Mario game locked behind for its difficulty. And even then, this was a remade version of the game with much more color and better physics. The original ROM wouldn't come out in America until its re-release on the Wii's Virtual Console in 2007, nearly 21 years later. Anyways, as I mentioned earlier, this game was rejected purely off of its unfair difficulty, especially for something so early in the series. Now, what was difficult about it? Was it unfair enemy placement? Was it a horrible coding design like Mario's contact with enemies and platforms? Or were the playtesters actually 7-year-olds after doing their first all-nighter? Well, it's really because of the level design. Like I said before, not a lot of new things were added in this game outside of the red piranha plant and a new power-up, or maybe more like a power-down. The poison mushroom, which will either kill Mario or revert him back to small form if made contact with. Nothing like those could have made the game difficult. What instead does is a lot of the platforming in mind. Even though the game seems about the same length as Super Mario Bros. With 8 worlds and 4 levels each, it actually plays out much longer even with no deaths whatsoever, since levels have much longer length to them. Not only that, but a lot of these levels are pure assery. For World 1 and 2, they aren't a hassle, you should get through them just fine. World 3 and 4 is when the game will start getting tricky with some silly enemy placements and leap of faiths, which, by the way, becomes a constant near the end of the game. World 5 is when the game really starts to fuck with you though, with more sporadic uses of hammer bros, which charge at you when approached, and much more tighter platforming, especially made worse with either wind, high sky trampolines, or... Oh, okay, I see. They think that shit's funny, huh? They thought that they could do what Kaizo does. Well, not on my fucking watch, because believe it or not, I got through this game. I mean, is it a shock? I got through Ghosts and Goblins. Do you think this'll stop me? Well, it kinda did. Thrice, in fact, because once you get to World 5 and onwards, each castle starts having warp paths. Now, warp paths are nothing new to this game, they were in the original, but compared to the original, it's absolutely something else. The original game only used a warp point in like 2 castles for like a few select rooms meant to be easily run through in a fewie and will easily place back in order to try again if failed. In this game though, you will run the time on just the first warp point. And the final castle, oh my God, this shit is a fucking maze the way you have to run through most of these. Some of these even require you to fall through on set paths to make your way through it. And some of the levels also have warp points, requiring you to climb vines from 1 block out of a billion on a leap of faith. So I said, fuck this, I'll be here all damn day, and whipped out a guide. Bit of a shame since Worlds 1 through 5 can easily be done without so, maybe 6 if you have some spare time. But 7 and 8, my god, it felt never ending sometimes. Even though the warp points are fucking awful in this game, I still think the heavy use of leap of faiths is the worst part, since most of the time they either end up being really tight due to having little run space in between if you're trying to find your landing spot, or are reliant on one moving paratrooper, which, yeah, they don't change up their patterns or anything, but it's very easy to over or undershoot. There's a point where a game feels unfair, and a point where you can tell the developers were fucking giggling to themselves about how this specific level will make a player blow their brains out. Anyways, once you make it out of this hot garbage mess, you reach the final castle of the game. Defeat Bowser's supposed brother, I think? They always flip-flop on this specific Bowser sprite. You reach the end, beat Bowser pretty easily, and make it to Princess Toadstool, who thanks you for saving her, and yeah, it's the exact same fucking ending. Except, I guess, with a Toad orgy going on, which automatically makes this better than the one before. But wait! There's more! God, there's more! If you beat the whole game Worlds 1 through 8 without warping, which I don't know why you would want to try that since many warp pipes just bring you back to an earlier world, even bigger dick move honestly. But if you don't warp, you get to try out World 9, which is just kind of a more garbled mess than the 8 earlier worlds, but it's got these cool negative pipe sprites that look really good honestly. Oh, it also fucks you over anyways if you complete it. What a way to end this game. Apparently there exists a world A through D if you manage to beat the game 8 times, and there's your reason why I won't be covering them. Although Super Mario Bros. 2 was a hit in the Japanese market, it never saw release in America. Instead, Nintendo of America kind of squandered a license between another Japanese network to kind of retrofit their game just with Mario characters instead. You know, I'm surprised whenever it comes to re-releasing this title, there isn't any, like, some sort of licensing issues or something, because, like, technically, they built Super Mario Bros. 2, at least the one in America, off of their game, Doki Doki Panic. But they also cooperated with Nintendo Japan to make Doki Doki Panic in the first place, since the engine was built by Nintendo, which would make this a licensing triangle? I think my brain just snapped its stem. Whatever, forget whatever the fuck I was just saying. Super Mario Bros. 2 for America. Now this is such an odd sequel to follow up to, at least for the Americas, since as said before, Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels didn't see the light of day outside Japan until Super Mario All-Stars. But Super Mario Bros. 2 is entirely taken from Doki Doki Panic with some few sprite changes to represent a more Mario game in style. But the core elements and gameplay are nothing like Super Mario Bros. Outside of basic platforming. For one, and the first thing you see is that not only are Mario and Luigi playable, but also Princess Toadstool and Toad are also playable, all 4 of which have their own traits unlike the others. Mario is the overall character. He has a good jump, a good walk and run speed, and good traction even on ice. Luigi, meanwhile, has a lankier hitbox which can make him susceptible to any semi-low flying enemies, but he has the highest and floatiest jump in terms of actual rise into descent, and his speed is subpar compared to most, which also makes him slippier on ice too due to the low traction that comes with it. Toad is really fucking fast, but he also has a short jump, with some gaps later in the game being completely inaccessible for him to get past through. Since he is shrub size, he is often very hard for enemies to hit. Finally, Toadstool has a decent jump height, roughly Mario's, but also has a floating ability on top of it where she can stay in the air for approximately 2 seconds before dropping down. She can move during her float, so it's much more helpful in crossing gaps where you'd need to supercharge jump. She does, however, have a slow run speed, but can manage herself on ice, unlike Squeegee here. Otherwise, most of everything else they share, including climbing, plucking, throwing, and having the ability to run and jump. That's the main mechanic of Super Mario Bros. 2. You no longer jump on enemies to defeat them, rather you use vegetables, items, or blocks by plucking them from above and then tossing at them. Some items like Pow Block work like a screen nuke for all enemies, and others like this potion can summon doors that take you to this inverted version of the screen you were just in, which can contain coins for jackpot rolling or mushrooms, which increases your health along with giving you an extra hit point. That's another thing to mention. Although Super Mario Bros. Did have hit points, it was usually determined by the power-ups, as all power-ups outside of Star gave you an extra hit point alongside whatever effects they had. In Super Mario Bros. 2, outside of the Starman that appears once in a blue moon, there aren't really any power-ups in the game, or at least ones with the same effect as Super Mario Bros. The mushroom simply acts like a 1-up but gives you a boost back to normal status if shrunk, and gives you an extra hit point which can stack up to 4, meaning you can take 3 hits before being reverted to small. Being small kinda sucks in this game, by the way. A lot more gaps become unclearable for characters like Toad, and of course if you're hit, you die and you have to start at the beginning of the level. Fine, that is fair. It's also a lot better now that if you get a game over, you simply start at the beginning of the world you're at rather than being sent all the way back at the beginning like Super Mario Bros. I don't know why, but being small in this game feels a lot worse than being small in any other Mario game. Maybe it's because their head sprites stay the same instead of being scaled down, so some hits just make you go, what the fuck? Super Mario Bros. 2 also establishes vertical scrolling, a first in the Mario series, though it wouldn't be pushed to its greatest extent until Super Mario Bros. 3, which allowed for simultaneous horizontal and vertical scrolling, which is why you also see that weird inverted color line on the side of the screen in that game. But for Mario 2, they simply froze the screen in place whenever you moved up or down and pushed the camera from that position to the new screen. Anyways, the story goes something like this. An evil creature by the name of Wart had taken over Subcon, the land of dreams, and it's up to you to help to put an end to his force and also free all of the inhabitants of Subcon, these fairy-looking dudes. That's at least a short-form interpretation of the exact scenario explained on the title screen. They probably just used this scenario as a means to explain why this Mario game is a lot more different than the first one before it, but keep this in mind for later when it'll be brought up again. Graphically, the game is a complete upgrade, not minding the fact that most of the sprite assets were reused from Doki Doki Panic. Mario and Luigi look more like, well, Mario and Luigi. At least they look closer to Mario and Luigi from artworks at the time in a more sprite form. You know, their eyes and mustache stand out more and their overall colors are much closer to that than what Super Mario Bros. Was going for. The game is just very vibrant overall compared to Super Mario Bros., though that may honestly be because of the diverse landscapes across each world. Like, it's not like just a grassy overworld, there's also a desert and snow overworld. Though I do find it weird how they omit underwater levels, but that's likely because Doki Doki simply didn't have that design to it, focusing more on a bizarro Arab Indian fantasy. I mean, it does take place in a dream world after all, which explains the word locations, and also the fact that none of the enemies from the first game return. Closest you'll get is the Koopa shell as a toss item, and that was only done in order to remove, this sprite. Instead, you get new enemies like Shy Guys and Bob-ombs and Pokies, and some more obscure ones like Ostros and Albatrosses and Flurries, and these mask guys who I never thought were that hard to deal with, honestly. Just drop the key for a second and they'll fuck right off. Bosses in this game are also nothing like the original, as Bowser has not even one appearance in this game. You'll fight with villains like Mouser, who was honestly the best character in the Mario cartoon show. Man, it's really weird seeing Bowser in a show mostly based off of Super Mario Bros. 2's character, its enemies, and sort of dream world when in more exotic locations. Triclydes, Fry Guys, Clog Glips, and the most frequent mini-boss in the game named Berta, who is not only mistranslated during the credits, but even dead named by the fucking game and manual. Damn, I mean like representation and all that shit, but she just wanted to be called Bertetta, and now no one respects that. Not even Nintendo. Your final opponent is this big tubby frogman named Wart, who was the invader of Subcon and took away the Dream Machine so that it turns dreams into monsters to help him take control of the Dream World. Despite being the final boss and main villain of a Super Mario game, Wart would never make a reappearance in another Mario game outside of remakes and ports. Hell, he barely had any representation in any Nintendo games for a long time. Only other notable instance was a very small role in The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening, and also the remake for finally giving him a 3D model. Wart is kinda tough, especially since you have to catch vegetables from the Dream Machine all the while avoiding spit bubbles and also timing your throw since he doesn't get hurt unless his mouth is wide open. But this isn't gonna bust your balls or anything. Wait, why does he have a vegetable option on the Dream Machine if he hates them? You know, now that I think about it, this whole game was just a lesson on not being a picky eater and to always eat your vegetables. Lest you end up in some dream world dealing with a piggy frog and a bunch of shitty one-time enemies that would never see the light of day again. You know, even though the game didn't really have much of a strong installment on the NES and took a fuck ton while to receive that official treatment in later titles, I still think it was ultimately the best decision to have had this game be the sequel to Super Mario Bros. For one, it's a complete graphical update in comparison to Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, and has a much more extensive design to the environments of the worlds, enemies, and platforming scenarios despite having a shorter level count. 2, even if the game did overhaul the core aspects of the original Super Mario Bros., which you could argue had its extents all the way to Donkey Kong, it's not like it was a permanent decision, and plus, I think I'd rather take something more innovating, even if it was just an asset change of Doki Doki Panic, over just like hit Super Mario Bros. Game, but the levels will make you piss your pants and shit on your mama's balls. I think a good thing to take away from this is that although it doesn't feel like a Super Mario game, it can pass as a Super Mario game. Like, even with many of the core aspects missing from the first game which defined it, it still shares a lot of elements and design choices in similar vein to the first game that people can look back at this as still more of a official Mario game than a sprite ripoff game, if that makes any sense. Damn, we are just halfway through finishing up all of these games, but we are not done just yet. We are about to review the most innovating Super Mario, or even standalone Mario title of all time, Super Mario Bros. 3. If I'm going to be honest with y'all, I think this one takes the cake. Super Mario Bros. 3 completely reinvented the Super Mario formula by adding just so much to it. I've never seen such an improvement from one game to another, even if it was a 2.5-year development. And yeah, I know that Super Mario Bros. 2 was a thing in America, but you gotta understand that that was mostly a collective work under NOA in order to get something else out in time. For home stage Nintendo, this was done right after their Super Mario Bros. 2 was finished. A lot of original ideas were put into this development, including a planned isometric view akin to The Legend of Zelda. That didn't end up happening, but similar elements like an inventory when on the world map and a status bar for when in levels were kept in. Although the game had finished development in 1988, a shortage of ROM chips and cartridges ended up delaying the game in American release by nearly 2 years. This was when Nintendo was going full promo to hype anticipation for the game's upcoming release by not just placing it in every section of each Nintendo Power magazine before the release of the game, but also bringing in a hype-ass scene for a lame-ass movie that was literally just a giant products show off for two big giants. So weird to see Universal and Nintendo work on something together. I mean, their lawsuit was not even a decade old yet. Talk about patching up quickly. But Super Mario Bros. 3, man, I can't even explain just how much this title does. It's almost unexplainable. The jump from this to this to this is... I mean, just read from the cover itself. It's the biggest, most exciting Mario Brothers adventure yet. That's the best way to describe this game. Biggest and exciting. I'm lollygagging here, so let us continue from the beginning. After being returned to the Mushroom Kingdom, Bowser instead decides to target several different worlds, or lands, or... actually, I don't know, they kind of flip-flop between the two, who goes on to wreak havoc in those lands and transform their kings into creatures. It's up to Mario, or Luigi, to get back the 7 magical wands from Bowser's 7 Koopalings. Yeah, they retconned it once Sunshine came out. No surprise. To go get back the magical wands and retransform the king of each land rightfully back to the human form. The reason why we even care about these lands is apparently the Mushroom Kingdom is kind of bridged between all of these worlds, and so would lead to a much stronger invasive force on the Mushroom Kingdom, since, you know, they're encircled by Bowser's army, which would mean total defeat for the Mushroom Kingdom. Now, the worlds here aren't all the same to that of the first 2 Japanese releases. Rather, there is a diverse set of biomes for each world. Like, for example, the grassy overworld is for World 1, or the grassland, and the snowy overworld is for World 6, or the Iceland, amongst other examples. And even though there is a specific biome for each world, that doesn't mean it only pertains to that biome. For example, there are underground levels in World 2, or Desert Lands, and a plethora of sky levels outside of World 5, or Skyland. Also, since worlds are defined with a level selection HUD, that doesn't mean that it's simply all levels, as now you have different forms of interactions you can deal with on the map itself, like an optional route to a Toad's house for extra items, a forced interaction with a Hammer Bro if it's in your path, leading you to fight against 1 or 2, and different pathways that can be broken off with unique items like rocks. A lot of these elements would become standard for the non-3D Super Mario games here on. However, for its time, this was insane. It not only expanded the game's size a fuck ton, but also showed just how much the NES capabilities could be pushed to its limits. Of course, one issue with the much more added levels in World is that the levels are smaller. Like, very smaller. A lot of the early levels can be done in like sub 30 seconds, and most of the latter levels aren't much long either way. Some even requiring screen auto-scrolling so you don't get too ahead so easily and miss out on the platforming. Some levels may feel longer because of this, but of course they didn't just want to auto-scroll the player the whole time, so sometimes they'll come up with unique levels that either have warp points that'll extend your time in the level, or something like this underground level with the stupid fucking Koopa shell being required to find the pipe leading to the goal. Speaking of, the goal is no longer signified with a flagpole, rather this roulette box that will grant you either a mushroom, flower, or star card. Except if you're in a fortress or a Koopaling airship, then all you'll collect is a question ball or magic wand. Depending on how you match, you can either get a 1-up, 2-up, or 5-up. You can always see the goal coming up due to this black background, almost as if you're leaving some sort of room or something. Now that I think about it, the game does kind of hint at this not being a typical Mario adventure. I mean, some of the platforms have deadbolts attached to them, and some of the sky platforms have strings or wires or whatever connected. It honestly feels like a stage set. I mean, the game even starts with curtains opening to unveil the characters and logo, along with the ending when unveiling the credits. Plus, look at the floor. It's got this semi-3D illusion to it. Bowser must have been on a tight budget, especially with all these new foes you'll have to deal with. Seriously, the upgrade from 12 enemies to 41 is quite the sum and adds a lot more to levels rather than just the same Goomba, Koopa, Bullet Bill, Hammer Bro near the end type shit they had going almost all the time. Especially in Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels. I mean, tell me how many times a level is about to finish up and then a Hammer Bro appears. One too many is all I can say. I think my favorite enemy has to be the Fire Snake. They have such a cool sprite design, and I do think they are a bit challenging in spite of their sluggish speed. I also like this Buster Beetle dude. He just chucks shit at you, and he looks like a dopey Buzzy Beetle. Speaking of, Buzzy Beetles are the only enemies between Super Mario Bros. And Super Mario Bros. 3 to not get an updated sprite. Seriously, just look at this. Another thing expanded on is the item select. I mean, with all these new level ideas and elements in the overworld, there's bound to be a new cast of items to help give you the advantage or help as a level solver. And yes, I did say level solver. Looking at you, hide and seek Koopa Shell. Mushroom, 1-up, Fire Flower, and Star do make their return as to no one's surprise. Now for the new ones, we got... Damn. Like, holy shit, there's actually quite a lot in Mario's arsenal. We got the Super Leaf, aka the main thing of this game. It's even on the box art too. This must have been like the cat suit of its time. The Super Leaf allows Mario to engage in close quarter combat, making it easier to deal with shelled enemies without having to actually jump on them, and can allow him to fly for a bit once his P meter is reached to its max. The Super Leaf here actually has 2 more powerful variants. A P-Wing, which is essentially a get out of demonic level free card, and the Tanuki suit, which is almost the exact same thing as the Super Leaf, but it gives Mario much more warmth and also lets him turn into a statue, which is invincible with everything outside of hazards and boss bass for some strange reason. There are also 2 new suits added as additional power-ups. A frog suit, which allows Mario to control his swimming much better and also grants him faster speed underwater, but not as fast speed when on ground. The other is the hammer suit, which works in vain like a fire flower but is thrown at a much higher arc and can't bounce forward. The better thing about it is that it can annihilate through a lot of enemies, even buzzy beetles. But it's also very rare, so I didn't use my one and only until I got to the final castle. Hey, might have been a long wait, but at least I didn't drop it in the damn Iceland. Finally, you have the exclusive Goomba boot, or a shoe if you're a fucking nerd. This power-up can only be obtained by weirdly hitting a Goomba occupying the boot from the bottom, like below a brick. Once grabbed, it doesn't actually remove any additional power-ups you have, and it allows you to jump higher and walk over spiky objects. The only negative to it is if you can't carry it over to later levels. It's simply a World 5 Level 3 exclusive. Even though there are a lot of power-ups in the game, there's also existing items you can obtain through various secrets and special toad houses. These items aren't necessarily power-ups and more so interactive power-ups on elements in the map HUD. One being a cloud, which allows you to skip most levels outside of non-numbered specifics like airships, fortresses, and tanks. The hammer, which allows you to break any rocks or bricks blocking a path to some secret area or toad house. An anchor, which allows you to keep a Koopaling's airship in place. Never ran into this one, but it would have been helpful during this moment. A music box, which allows you to avoid having to deal with hammer bros on the map HUD. And the last one being the warp whistle, which brings you to the warp zone. Apparently, if you have two, you could go warp yourself to the warp zone and then warp yourself to the warp zone again, but at the warp path leading to the warp pipe to World 8. That sounds good for those who need to get back to their previous location or for speed running, but I only had one warp whistle for this run, and I used it when I got sick and tired of World 7. Love the world map music, but I ain't going through all this bullshit just to fight some fuckwad named Ludwig. I did take on all 6 other Koopalings, who all kind of had their own gimmick, but it's nothing crazy, honestly. These guys are honestly so easy. Even Wendy, and I know Wendy Def got a lot of flack over her infinite hoops. Hey, at least they're not as pathetic as Boom Boom. Seriously, this guy is so easy to beat, I contemplate on whether he's a mini-boss or just a reflex test before you get the goal. I'm rambling on at this point, but essentially after you retransform all of the kings into their original state, Bowser sends you a memo that he got the princess and that you should meet his ass at Darkland, or the final world, World 8. Darkland is probably one of the coolest worlds in the entire Super Mario series. It doesn't really represent a specific theme or biome, it's just this hellish underworld, or maybe overworld honestly, since most of the levels seem to take place at night. It also has some of the coolest levels so far in the series. I mean, would it be crazy for me to admit that this world is the only time I actually like the airship levels? They just fit more with the hell on earth vibes. And don't forget the tanks that literally blast cannons at every angles and drop bombs that light up the sky like it's the night of Los Angeles in 1942. I think that's why I like this final world the most out of any. It's no longer you versus the surrounding environment, rather it's you going to face against the might of Bowser's army, tanks and everything. And even when it's not that, you still have to deal with a lot of the trickery like false pipes in these hands that definitely do not know what personal space is. Finally, however, after making your way through the 3rd or 4th or 5th pipe of the world, you face head-on with Bowser's final parade before making your way to his castle of Doom. Oh damn, I'm already there. Huh. I'm gonna be honest, I was already spoiled the route of this castle from, funnily enough, online level in Super Mario Maker. I think I even used to hold the record at one point there. So yeah, after smoking Bowser with a fucking hammer to the head, we go in and meet Toadstool, who throws in a really odd reference to the original Toad messages for some reason. I don't know if this was supposed to catch kids off guard for a second or like make them laugh. I don't know. It just felt out of place. I don't know where to go from here. And that is why I love Super Mario Bros. 3 and consider it to be not only the best of the early Super Mario titles, but also the one that pushed the series to where it's at. It not only graphically pushed the NES visuals to a whole new level, but also implemented a lot of elements and creative choices that would become set standard for the series onward. Out of all the Mario titles on the NES, this is the one I'd consider a must-play and a must-own. Outside of the weird reference at the end, there is no tie to the original or the double sequels. This is a Mario game you have to play. Even if Mario isn't your strong suit, if you're into platformers, this is easily a top tier game to still pick up. Not all levels are simple dashes from one place to another. A lot of them are not only just plain fun, but also very challenging. And some levels do have secret locales that tie to specific power-ups outside of simply using them to put yourself at a stronger advantage. On God, some of the most clever level design I've seen in a platforming title. Damn, all 4 NES Super Mario titles, completed and covered. It's crazy that the month ends off on such a big video, but, you know, I do what's best for y'all. But we still got one more title to look at, this one being more super than the others. In fact, you can say it's twice as super as the other Super Mario games. Yeah, that's fucking right. We're not done just yet. We're about to finish this review off with a Super Nintendo Entertainment System game. Wow, that's a mouthful. I don't think I need to keep going on about which SNES title this is. We all know what I'm talking about, and that's Super Mario World. Starting development after finishing Super Mario Bros. 3 and ending in 1990, Super Mario World took about 3 years to make, as Nintendo had wanted to push what they could limit-wise for the new console they were still working with. When it came to the new Mario title in the work, they had wanted to recreate a lot of what they had done with Super Mario Bros. 3, but with a more centralized direction. For one, it follows the same plan of Bowser kidnapping Princess Peach along with his Koopalings and Koopa army invading locations to grow their army stronger. However, unlike with Super Mario Bros. 3, Peach is immediately kidnapped during a vacation stay at Dinosaur Island, which is also the location where the Koopa army has invaded, rather than separate worlds. Dinosaur Island is a singular landmass consisting of many locales that range with what possibly environments dinosaurs would live in to athletic, high-in-the-sky platforming galore. Despite this, I don't think the theming here is that strong. Let me put it this way. In Super Mario Bros. 3, each world was essentially its own thing, its own biome, its own environment. As it should be, since all these worlds are completely different landmasses separated from one another. This allows you a large variety to select from in terms of world design, but does make the worlds feel disconnected, which means you'll waste more time explaining why each world has to be rescued or traveled through. With Super Mario World, the game is all connected to one single landmass, allowing the world you're traversing through to feel more complete and connected with, but also making the world design difficult to deal with, and along with that, the theming. That's not to say that Super Mario World has bad theming or world design, it clearly doesn't, but if we were to uphold it to the value of something like Super Mario Sunshine's theming, a game ultimately restricted by its environment, yet tends to have some of the best area theming in the Mario series out of it, then you'd feel that Super Mario World's way of theming makes the land feel connected, but also way too samey, for a lack of better words. I know that may sound weird to hear since you have sky levels, underwater levels, forest levels, treacherous mountain levels, haunted ghost levels, all that sort of good shit. But I think what it may really be is just a similar color palettes when designing levels. A lot of these levels have different settings that still feel connected, and they are vibrant, but most of the background and ground tiles use a lot of the similar shades of green, brown, or yellow. Like I said, I'm not dissing on the game for doing a more connected level to world design, I just think that the similar color usage for its level theming makes the game feel a bit repetitive, especially in long sessions like what I did when running through this game. Not trying to diss, especially with a selection of over 73 levels across 9 different areas, just trying to explain my reasoning on why I felt kind of bored running through this game sometimes. There are some really neat levels, however, such as this awesome Night Lake level that just looks so fucking cool for no reason. And they only did it twice in the whole game! I also thought the Ghost Valley ship was a cool level too. It somehow feels much creepier to get through than the ghost houses themselves. Yeah, sorry to burst your bubbles, but I did not find the ghost house levels that intimidating to get through, though I do like how the castles are designed, much longer in length while being an obstacle course that tests your knowledge on Mario's abilities no matter his strength at that point. Pretty good, since that means less chances of this stupid gimmick coming in, but don't you think it's gone just yet. Also, the music is just fantastic for a castle theme. Of course, with the Koopa army coming in comes new enemies, lots of them, some of which I think are native to this landmass, but it doesn't matter for Mario since if it hurts him, he splurts them, and with a new array of power-ups, Mario will truly be more prepared than before. Oh wait, I forgot. We're not in the Mushroom Kingdom anymore. Well, hope you enjoy what you got, cause now we only get 5 new power-ups. Well, technically 6, but I don't want to throw my homeboy under the bus like that, so we'll look at the 5 transforming power-ups in this game. Mushrooms, fire flowers, and stars are about the same, though stars last a lot longer than they did in Super Mario Bros. 3. So now we only have 2 new power-ups. The P-Balloon, which allows Mario to become inflated and float across the level for a limited time, usually over lava or bottomless pits, and the new and improved Tanuki Tail, or as it'll be known here as the Cape Feather, which when grabbed will allow Mario to gain a cape that can let him spin on the ground, knocking any enemies away, a floating descent after a jump, or if he runs at full speed, the ability to glide. It's essentially this game's version of the Super Leaf, except you don't have a P limit, because when Mario jumps, so long as you understand basic aerodynamics, you can essentially glide through the whole level. Though many levels aren't that open, as they'll usually have tall platforms or pipe walls blocking from the top, and also landing on a hard dive will screen nuke any ground opponents, so it's not like you could go wrong with this power up. Of course, there's one more power up we gotta talk about. I mean, is it really a power up? Like, I think of it more like the Goomba Shoe, in all honesty. You don't transform into anything, but you do get an extra hit point and get access to some moves and power-ups. Well, he gets access to those power-ups. Who's he? Well, it's Yoshi! Being considered but always scrapped due to his technical limitations, Yoshi finally makes his debut as a dinosaur partner for Mario to ride on, with him and his species being held hostage or stuffed into blocks by Bowser and his army, which is why you need to make your way to the Koopalings since they hold most of them hostage in their castles. Yoshi gives you a higher jump length even when small and can swallow enemies to count towards your point or coin total. If he swallows fruit hanging around bushes, he'll release an egg that contains a 1-up. If Yoshi touches an enemy, you automatically dismount off him, though still in your original state as he runs around nervously, and if you need him, you're gonna have to hop back on. Another thing to note is that you can dismount Yoshi anytime, even in midair, so keep that information in your head when you're reaching that one level. Not only does Yoshi have all these abilities, but he can also gain power-ups himself. These usually derive from saving them from the Koopalings and getting their mini versions to grow full size. Green ones are as basic gets, red ones allow you to spit 3 fireballs at once in different directions, yellow ones gives Yoshi a sort of super stomp when landing, as he forms puff clouds that will auto-kill any enemies in range, and the blue one, which have the coolest abilities, can fly, though any Yoshi can turn blue and fly if they collect a Yoshi wing. Yoshi was simply a genius design to add into the game, and it's no wonder why Miyamoto held on to the idea for half a decade. Yoshi grants a sort of easy mode to casual players and also allows much more dynamic platforming capabilities for players that really know how platformers play. Plus, he was so popular that they even gave him his own little series, which was mostly puzzle games for some strange reason. I mean, wasn't Dr. Mario enough? There also exists other forms of items, but these are usually for non-transformative uses, like adding additional lives, totaling your coin score, allowing you to access secret locations in different levels, yada yada. I didn't go the full extra mile for this playthrough, but there are really a lot of branches, bonuses, and secret spots you can discover in this game. Some that straight up bring you to different locations across the map, which is definitely good since all of the world map interaction elements from Super Mario Bros. 3 are completely gone, encouraging stronger exploration throughout each level and also not making it be required to have a certain item at a certain point of the game just to reach a hidden level. Now, not all HUD elements are completely gone. As per usual, we still retain the level selection off the world map, and the game still has an inventory spot for items. Well, one inventory spot for items, and by items I mean power-ups, as when booting up a level there will always be this blue box hovering over the player along with the rest of the UI. This is where you can store one additional power-up, whether that be collected from an item block or being switched as you collect a different power-up. The game allows you to access this stored item anytime you want in a level, and will sometimes even auto-boot it out of the stored inventory if you're brought down to Small Mario from a power-up loss. I see the former explanation as a benefit, but the latter explanation not so much. If I wanted to access the power-up myself, I would simply press the select button. I don't need the game to release it for me, especially if I'm in a really bad spot, and I don't mean as in my condition or anything, I mean my literal fucking spot where I'm standing at. So after defeating all of the Koopalings and rescuing the Yoshis held hostage inside, the Valley of Bowser rises out of the deep water. This is such a cool fucking cave design. Seriously, whoever Bowser's sculptor is, need a fucking pay raise, assuming this isn't a natural rock. Most of the Valley of Bowser is located underground, outside of the ghost house and fortresses, before making your way to Bowser's castle. Now, for the most part, the levels in this valley are pretty easy. In fact, not only that, I'd say most levels and fortresses are pretty easy in this game. This is where the Mario series would start exponentially tuning down its difficulty. Mario 3 had made some progress with that, but it still had a step-by-step difficulty scaling when going from each world to each world. Super Mario World focuses upright on level design over level difficulty, giving the stages a more creative gameplay on terrain, the environment, and well-timed scenarios to deal with enemies, like having question blocks near tougher enemies or giving much more space on a platform if an enemy is occupying it, instead of simply focusing on platform placement and players' reaction, thinking, plus trial and error when it comes to tougher levels in the earlier games. Seriously, outside of ghost houses in the Sky Zone, I rarely died on any other level, and even then some of the deaths in the ghost houses were simply due to time loss from the maze-like design of a few of them. Speaking of, Bowser's Castle breaks its tradition of usually having warp paths, instead allowing you to choose a numbered door that will progress forwards when ran through. I had originally thought the numbers were based on difficulty, but as it turns out, it's simply a level selection within a level. None of the rooms are supposed to be difficult whatsoever, only really to impede your travel to Bowser. And even then, this isn't all that true, since you can play pretty patiently in a lot of these rooms and not worry about taking damage or losing a life, especially since the game gives you a good 400-second timer, and the fact you only have to travel through 2 rooms before leading up to Bowser. It would be something else if they made you go through all 8 rooms before making your way to Bowser. Now, Bowser's Battle is probably the best not only in terms of the early Super Mario titles, but also out of all of the Super Mario titles then and now. Bowser stays atop Mario via his Koopa Clown Copter and forces you to play at his own pace. It doesn't feel right up front, but still combat incentive. And there's no cheap way out, as your power-ups can't reach him to damage him, nor is there some auto-death MacGuffin to completely rid of Bowser. You simply have to play by his rules until he tosses out a Mecha Koopa that you can toss back at him. And even though the battle is extended much more than a usual Bowser fight, it shouldn't be treated so much as an endurance run, as every hit allows Mario time to retreat to a safer spot and to also retrieve an item from Peach should he be in a bad state of condition. This sprite of Peach always freaked me the fuck out. I don't know why, but the way her sprite is animated looks really jarring, especially in the scenario she's in. That definitely doesn't help with it. I really like this fight, and along with the intimidating music, I can see why this is in a lot of people's favorites. After defeating Bowser, Peach descends from the Koopa Clown Copter. I have no idea why Bowser didn't just hold her in place in order to keep her inside, but whatever keeps the story going, I guess. Peach thanks you for rescuing her and actually gives you a kiss, which I think is the first in the series, or at least the first in the mainline series. Followed by both of you, along with the rescued Yoshi eggs, to parade outside to enjoy the rest of your vacation. Or to go back home. I don't know, it just ends with them marching still. As you'll hear one of the greatest musical compositions by Kaji Kondo once the circle opens back up to show off the credits. Damn. What an experience. I mean, at least for an early Super Nintendo title, because as the library later expanded, we got much larger and greater adventures, but seriously, the jump from Super Mario Bros. 3 and this game within a year for the West must have been crazy, which is probably why Super Mario World is still the best-selling game on the SNES, double that of the second best-selling game. This one is definitely a must-play and a very good Super Mario title overall. I still think Super Mario Bros. 3 holds out as the better game for me, but I won't lie and say that I didn't enjoy playing through this game, because it definitely was a nice adventure. Not too many flaws, and the few I have are more so just inconveniences on my part. Would definitely recommend this title because Lord knows nobody else has said the same damn thing. Damn. I can't believe it. This whole month just flew by just like that. Like, wow. We started off on the Nintendo Entertainment System and ended off with the best platformers of their times. Well, they still hold up, let's be honest, they really do still hold up. I know for some it would have probably been best to separate these into their own videos, but to be honest, I think having a big video to end off the Reviewathon this month just makes me so much more relieved over it. Plus, it's not like there's too much of a difference. They all are platforms by the end of the day, though I could say that for a lot more games. It's called author's choice, okay? That's my excuse. It's fine though, now that everything's back to order, Mario Kart 7 will be my top priority, and it will be released before the end of October. I promise that on my mother's soon-to-be-added in the far future grave. But, for now, after doing all of that work within this whole month, all of that script writing throughout the earlier months, I think it's about time I go take a rest, just for tonight. Thank you all for watching, and have yourself a happy October. I'll see you guys soon.